So good morning. Like Josh said, my name is Eric. The Assistant District Forester on the Tioga Forest District. Last summer, Jeremy got a hold of me and wondered if we would host a tour in our district. I agreed to it. So we put together a tour to look at some of the projects that we've done in our district over the last several years. A lot of what we've done with prescribed fire is focused on post removal treatments and maintaining an oak component to try to prevent those stands from converting to a music hardwood site. So last year, the tour that we held there, it was well represented. We had people from multiple agencies that were there. There's a lot of folks in this room that I know were there. Like I said, 59 individuals representing DCNR, both forestry and state parks. Had the Forest Service there. Pennsylvania Game Commission was well represented. Had some folks from the Nature Conservancy, a couple people from Pheasants Forever, NDA was there, Rough Grouse Society, and then there were also a couple from private industry that were there. The tour that we had planned, we had originally wanted to do 4 stops. Time didn't allow for the 4th stop. We started at the district office. We all rode to the northern section of our state forest in the ASIF tract. We looked at the Goodall unit there. From there, we slid down through the Bigwood section of our district to look at the silverbat and trophy squirrel units. So the Goodall unit was the first one that we stopped and looked at. It's a 33-acre unit in Shippen Township, Tioga County. This is, it wasn't the first one that we had done post-removal burn. It was the second burn that we had done post-removal. But to go and look at the first one we had done, it didn't really fit within that travel route that we had. So we wanted to stop and look at this one to give some folks an idea of, kind of what it looks like several years down the road post burn. So to give a little site history, this site, this was unique in the fact that we'd actually put fire into this site prior to taking the overstory off. So in 2007, Steve Hoover, he was a forester in the district. He had proposed a site prep burn. We'd done a site prep burn in there. It was mainly to control and some competing vegetation, striped maple, red maple. He got a decent acorn crop. We had good regeneration come up. So shortly after that, it was the next year, it was proposed as a 2008 sale. It probably wasn't cut right then. Anyhow, the top came off of it. We had a good amount of oak regen that was on the ground. But what we were seeing was we had a lot of red maple that was coming up that was overtaking that oak regen. The deer were browsing it heavily, and there was no money in the budget. We'd proposed fencing it. There wasn't enough money in the budget to take care of that. So we watched it, and we just kind of watched that red maple component slowly creeping up, starting to overtake the oak. It's kind of a last-ditch effort. In 2017, we decided that we were going to put fire into this site, try to top kill everything in hopes that the oak that was on the site would respond. So right here, a couple pictures. This is what it looked like pre-burn. You can see there's some oak in there, but for the most part, it looks like it's a red maple site. As with all of our other ones that we're going to be looking at, they're in an overstory removal state. So you're looking at 20 to 30 square feet of basal area left per acre in the overstory. We did have a good abundance of red, white, and chestnut oak acorns. These were actually a little bit taller because this was like 9 years post overstory removal. The height on a lot of the oak was 1 to 8 feet. Most of the root collar diameters on the oak were greater than an inch. The issue, like we talked about, was the red maple. And if you look at what the red maple was pre-burn, we had 2 to 15 feet in height and 1 to 4 inches in diameter. The understory had a little bit of scattered mountain laurel was in it. Main fuel that was going to carry that fire was going to be the fern and the grasses and leaf litter. A little bit of coarse woody debris that was left from the timber harvest, the really heavy stuff that hadn't broke down in that time. So the day we burned it, mid-April seems to be when we're doing a lot of our burns up there in the northern tier. Wind, temperature and RH, everything was all in line with our burn plan. We had one ignition team and we strip head fired this unit. You can see at the southern end where that little star is, that's where we started test fire. And then we just stripped it off. Mainly that was to try and build enough heat in that unit, with it being the kind of fine fuels and stuff. Had to run the strips fairly close together in order to generate enough heat to get good fire effects in that unit. So here are a few pictures from that burn day. This will kind of give even the people that were at the site tour that day. We didn't have pictures to be able to show you what it looked like pre-burn and what it looked like going on burn day. So this will give you a little bit of an idea of kind of the fuels and fire behavior that we had in those units. So the next unit that we looked at, we ended up going to the Silverbat burn unit. It was a small unit. 2007, we had a first entry shelter wood in that site. It sat until we got a decent cohort of oak regen in there to the point where we felt comfortable taking the top off. 2019, the overstory removal harvest was done, and then we moved to burn that with a post overstory treatment in April of 2023. I don't know if you can see it back there. The Silverbat unit is going to be the westernmost unit, the little triangle piece there. Similar, like I said, post removal, 10 to 20 square feet of basal area per acre in this one. The red, white, and chestnut oak, again, it was well established, well distributed. Average height on that was about 4 feet, and the root collar diameter, it was a little bit smaller, hadn't had as much time to develop as the site in Goodall. So you're still looking, they're decent root collar diameters, ½ inch to 1 inch in diameter. And the issue in this one is going to be not only red maple, but also black birch. And if you look in that picture, so that's a picture from the tour. And that is the chunk that we're looking at right there that was not burned. So that's kind of what the pre-burn stand conditions look like. A lot of black birch in that 12 to 15 foot height range, with that oak kind of hanging out right about halfway at the height of what the birch is, about 6 to 8 feet. This one, similar, scattered mountain laurel, ferns, grasses, and rubus. There's a lot of rubus in this site, which made firing a little less than comfortable. And then there was also, because this was a more recent, this was carried out closer to the actual timber harvest, we did have heavy cured slash from the recent harvest. Burn day towards the end of April. This one we had 2 ignition teams. So the thing that's kind of unique about this site too, we actually had wetting rain the day before. There was talk that we may end up pulling the plug on this one, but we wanted to try it just to see. It took a little bit longer once we got into the test fire that morning. It took a little bit longer to determine whether we were actually going to meet objectives. Where the black star is there on the northern part of that is where we started with test fire. We had 2 different firing teams. We wanted to try and black in the western upslope line, and then we also had a second team that fired down that eastern flank. It was progressing pretty slowly, so we ended up throwing some flanking fire in there to try and build a little more heat to progress that along a little bit quicker while also maintaining our resonance time. And here's some pictures from that unit. The top picture there, the split screen. We've had the privilege of working with some folks. So this is a Department 50. Basically, he comes out and he helps with our prescribed burns, runs a drone. He helps with the thermals to pick up spots, and he also gets some really cool pictures like that. So this will give you a little bit of an idea of what the site looked like pre-burn and then also on burn day. And then the last one that we looked at, we ended up going to the Trophy Squirrel 1 burn unit, and that's going to be the western unit on this one as well. This one, it was treated with the salvage overstory removal, or shelterwood rather, in 2015. We had some mortality events, late spring frost, different things that had caused some mortality in both of these units. So The timber sale was laid out around the blocks of mortality. Sat for 5 years until the oak that was on the ground established. 2020, it was removed. And then this past April of 24, we put the post removal fire in that unit. So here's a picture of it before. It's very similar. All of our units are very similar. When we go to that post removal fire, this is basically where our sights are sitting. So here's a picture from the top dozer line, kind of looking out over the unit. You can see a lot of heavy slash. You can notice where a lot of that heavy slash is. It's right alongside the line. As we get a couple more slides into this, we'll go to the lessons learned, and that's where that's going to come into play. So on burn day, it was April 26th, and we had 2 ignition teams on this unit. There's a lot of folks actually in the room. We had a lot of staffing on this fire. There was some concern with the position of the unit, the way it laid. With it being a mid-slope line, that we were going to have some issues holding. Also, the fuels that were above that, pretty volatile fuels above it. So ended up bringing in a pile of resources for this one, just because of the complexity of the unit. We had test fire at reference point B, and that went fairly well. It took a little bit of time to get going on that. We had some shading on that upper line. So it took a little bit before we were satisfied that the results we were going to get were going to be satisfactory. Had one firing team progress to the south out that line, and then another firing team progress on that northern line, trying to build black. The wind, it was forecasted a southeast wind, but that really didn't materialize. It was more of a southwest wind that ended up pushing that northern line pretty hard. Here's some pictures from that. You can see that the fire behavior in this one, large flame lengths, heavy fuels close to the line. So we actually had some technical difficulties that day, where we had a couple engines go down. We were picking up a lot of spots along that northern line. We were going to try to wrap it up right through the middle of the unit. Basically, those 2 little top hat looking deals there are they're log landings. So from the log landing right there at C, we had kind of wasn't really a check line that went from where that landing is down to E, but it was mainly for access to be able to get equipment down that. The decision was made to try and check it up at that line. And with the fire behavior that we had that day, the winds get really kind of strange towards the mid-afternoon, late afternoon. We've noticed that on a lot of our burns. They don't do what you would typically expect them to do. Ended up having an issue, spot across the line, and we ended up wrapping that unit up that day, but it got a little lively until we got everything buttoned up. But like I said, here's some of the pictures. You can tell the intensity looking at the color of that column. And so as we go, all of our burns, this is one of the first pages in our prescribed plans. So safety is going to be the number one. We want to provide safety for our group as well as safety for the public, but we also want to provide training opportunities as well. So in our district, we don't get a lot. We're fortunate that we don't get a lot in the way of wildfires in our district. So prescribed fire has been really helpful to get district staff familiar with equipment, and different firing techniques and stuff. Improve the growth and form of our established oak seedlings. We want to top kill the red maple and birch by 80% or more. Release our established oak seedlings above the 6-foot browse height, and then keep the overstory mortality less than 50%. Because we're burning in a post-overstory removal state, we try to adhere to that. It's not like when you're burning in a shelter wood where you've got value in those trees that are still standing on site. That value's been recovered at that point with the timber harvest. We end up putting some hot fire in there and scorching a few more of those overstory residual trees, it's really not the end of the world. So what we've noticed since we've been doing this since 2017, it's nothing that's new to anybody here in this room. Oak respond fast. We've noticed on a lot of our sites 18 to 36 inches of growth in the first season. The one thing that was kind of interesting that we noticed is that the red maple seems to catch up in that second season. So the Goodall unit that we looked at first, we went back in there the following year, and we were looking at it and we're like, well, this didn't work. You know, the maple's already, it's caught up to what the oak is. But we kept looking. And then by year 5, when we went back into that site, the oak hit the gas again, and it was right there in the codominant layer. It's not that the maple isn't there as well, but it's going to be a stocked oak site in the future. The oak has to be present pre-burn. Like you can't go and burn an area and expect the oak to increase in abundance. It's got to be there. It does improve the form and the vigor of those seedlings. So it may seem like the oak has increased, but looking at the plots that we do pre-burn and post-burn, that isn't necessarily the case. Black cherry was one thing that was really kind of interesting to us. The response we got out of black cherry was better than anything else. We had over 6 foot. We went back in and looked at that Goodall unit. There was a couple patches of black cherry in there. We went back in and looked at that, and from across the unit, we're like, what in the world is that growing there? And we got up to it, and it was black cherry regen that had sprouted. So that was kind of surprising. The 4 to 5 years post removal burn seems to be kind of that sweet spot from where you've got the oak has recovered from the timber harvest to the point where it's going to handle fire. A lot of your fuels are starting to break down at that point, so you don't have an insane fuel loading in it. So that's been kind of what we've been shooting for at this point, is trying to get 4 to 5 years post overstore removals when we try to get fire in those units. And then with the silverbat unit that we looked at, I don't know if many remember, but it appeared as though the birch, and this was second growing season when we went and looked at that site, that it appeared that the birch was overtopping the oak again. So whether that exhibits the same sort of growth that the red maple does, whether birch is a whole nother beast, we're going to monitor that, maybe an additional fire in that site to try and knock the birch back is going to be warranted there. And then the final thing we've noticed is that fencing may not be necessary post-burn. In the past, we've always been in the mindset, because we're dealing with small units, if we put fire in these, it's going to be a magnet to draw the deer in there. The deer are just going to crush everything that we've released with the fire. What we've noticed is that there is some deer impact, but it is not enough to overwhelm the site to the point where the oak is losing out. The oak is still winning. So a few of our lessons learned, like we talked about before, with the training aspect, prescribed fire makes for better wildland firefighters. It's increased our knowledge in the district of fuels, topography, and wind, how everything impacts fire behavior. It's increased our familiarity across the district, our maintenance divisions with suppression equipment, and it's also been really good to build cross-district and cross-agency relationships. We work with folks now on prescribed fire, neighboring districts from across the state, as well as different agencies. We've had the Game Commission help on. They were there with the trophy squirrel unit. So drones with thermal imaging. The last couple of years, we've been using drones with thermal imaging. They've been super helpful from keeping spots from becoming established. They're really helpful when you got dense drift smoke across the line where you can't actually see into the green to see what's going on. They're able to pick up. It's incredible what the drones are able to pick up, and we're able to get resources to before they turn into a big issue. The one thing that our drone operators have requested is to put grid lines on the map so it's easier for them to call out spots to the holding resources. And while it's a great tool, it's not a replacement for quality holding resources. Um, drones go down, you gotta change batteries. There's always something going on there that, you gotta have good eyes on the ground too. So, one of the things that we've really learned this past year is that we need to consider our prescribed burns prior to even laying out a timber sale. Like that needs to be, if you think you're gonna put fire into a timber sale in the future, plan for that. The mid-slope lines kind of got us hemmed up a little bit this year. That's something that we're gonna work on going forward, and how we lay everything out. We're gonna take those thoughts into consideration. For the foresters in the room, timber sale administration, if you're going to be burning a site, work with your operators, get that fuel loading away from the line. You want to decrease the fuel loading and jackpots that you've got along the perimeter. Line prep, everybody's familiar with dead snags and stuff. One thing that surprised us this year, we had some live white birch that were immediately adjacent to the line, perfectly healthy, looked great. We had fire climb those things and throw dollar bill size embers across the line. So live white birch trees don't get a pass anymore in our district. Reference points on some of those maps that I'd had there. We have reference points. We put those on the map and also on the ground. That way your holding resources and your firing resources can see. We can put everything on a Venza so you have good communication across the unit. People know how everything's progressing and can kind of see that way. And then finally, just continue to learn. Like every burn's a learning opportunity. We think after years of doing it that you have a pretty good handle on things, and you know what's going to happen when you go out and put fire on the ground. But each fire has been it's been a really good learning opportunity. So I just encourage everybody to take what you learned today and apply it to your burn tomorrow. And then also to remember that greatness will never be achieved without risk. I think with that, if anybody has any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
How soon after that overstory removal was done, did you do this fire extinguisher? Results look pretty good. And you see the effects.
So yeah, what we shoot for is that 4 to 5 year post overstory removal. The only thing, if you wait a little bit too long, the first one we did, that was 9 years post overstory removal. So basically, the longer you wait, you've got more of that mesic hardwood that's out competing your oak. So your oak's starting to fall out of the stand. So we try to hit them kind of that 4 to 5 year post harvest window, just to capitalize on the greatest amount of oak on the ground before it starts to fade out of the site.
Do you feel that using that post overstory removal fire increased overall diversity of desirable species that will be present in the dominant, co-dominant crown positions later on?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. If we were to do nothing in these sites, we convert them to basically they'd be a pure red maple site. Putting fire in them, you've got your multiple species of oaks, as well as some maple that'll make it into it. So yeah, absolutely, I would say it's increased the diversity of the sites by putting fire into them.